Welcome to Grief Anatomy. In today's episode 4, we are doing things a little differently. We are doing a 101 crash course with Andy and friends. In this Grief Anatomy, episode 3, titled Permission Slips and Pain, Grief Meets Consent. And if you are familiar with some of the other previous segments, this is where I invite a fellow grief comrade to share their personal, real-life lived experiences in grief, loss, and trauma. I also bring in a colleague to aid in the dissemination of information, just so you are not so bored with me, yapping all the time, in a singular narrative. Okay, so to summarize, Grief Anatomy Exploration is a place where emotions are up and down, with the propensity to grow even weirder or more chaotic as we examine and talk about the quiet stuff out loud. Where healing is nonlinear, and I, your friendly but mildly chaotic guide, am just trying to keep it together with caffeine and questionable coping mechanisms myself on life's tumultuous grief journey. Grief Anatomy boasts a crew of expert anonymous friends, that's you as the expert in the interview segment, and awkward colleagues, associates to aid you by encouraging and providing a super supportive environment to thrive instead of merely surviving. We are here to help navigate the messy, sometimes hysterical, and painfully real journeys of loss and grief, one conversation and discussion at a time. Grief is undeniably bizarre and categorically strange. People are equally uncomfortable talking about and normalizing grief overall, but we aim to change that. Here, we embrace the chaos with humor, honesty, and maybe an unnecessary number of snacks or treats to reward ourselves as positive reinforcements. Okay, folks, we are going to jump right in with both feet. I'm joined by a colleague, a fellow registered social worker who has been working with families navigating family structures, mental health illnesses in families, and all the complexities that accompany grief and loss. And as I recall, my colleague has an impressive collection of houseplants while considering them pets, and also a strong belief system in ice cream can cure all. Am I right?
Well, thank you, Andy. I'm absolutely thrilled to be here, and honestly, yes to all things ice cream. What can go wrong, especially in this weather? It is my comfort and grief treat, an essential part of my processing. So don't judge. You can judge, but this is what works for me every single time I need support. I encourage our listeners to try it or find their own comfort things, or food, preferably something chocolate-based and emotionally indulgent, if it were up to me.
I honestly cannot argue it is a decent coping strategy, one that I need to experiment with. Welcome to the podcast, and thank you for being here and for your contribution to our listeners' grief outcomes. The ice cream and plant reference is a mood, a whole vibe. I love it. I bet if you were on a political campaign, one of your top-tiered plans is that ice cream be considered as part of all coping strategies. Haha.
True story. I'm all about the talking, planting, and ice cream basking. No shame either.
So let's get started with some of the basics. In today's crash course, we are going to explore grief specifically and overall in cases where there can be more than one type of grief present. In these moments, then blend and complicate the grieving process exponentially and can be incredibly difficult to work through the horrendous terrain.
Oh, yes, I totally agree. Like one grief type is already too much for me, but now it has gone and duplicated itself to make life so much more complicated. We are going to start with aspects of complicated grief, otherwise known as prolonged grief disorder. This is typically where our emotions seem unresolved, tangled in the history of our relationships, patterns, and continue to embed themselves in our future thoughts, behaviors, triggers, etc. This kind of conflict, internally and externally, could likely result in the mixture of avoidance and anxiety, of relief and residual anger, showing that the grief and loss aren't just about missing someone, but about untangling yourself from the damage that is there.
Well said, friend. Next up is disenfranchised grief. Disenfranchised grief happens when grief and loss aren't fully recognized or validated by others. This has heavy and massive repercussions when validation does not occur for the person carrying the grief specifically. Grief that is not accepted or understood by others makes getting and receiving help next to impossible. If people expect us to grieve in a normal way, but our experiences are more about breaking free from manipulation and control that can create isolation and deep internal wounds.
The third and fourth are ambiguous and anticipatory loss. Ambiguous grief is where we can become emotionally distant, yet are still present in the environment. It happens without closure or clear understanding, often resulting in unresolved feelings. Anticipatory refers to grief experienced before a loss occurs.
Please note, there are other kinds of grief not listed here from Kubler-Ross. Some effects that accompany grief are 1. The phantom limb effect. When you reach for your phone to text them and remember, you can't. Cue existential crisis and painful disconnection issues. The emotional support stapler incident. When people think that office supplies can fix your soul like a staple comment can help put you back together, but remains unhelpful and more hurtful because staple comments don't work. 3. The at least epidemic, where people try and fail to comfort you with phrases that should be banned forever because they cause more harm than good. 4. Grief gymnastics, also known as dodging social invites, dodging certain areas, avoiding some songs, and crying in the pasta aisle for reasons unknown.
If you are experiencing anything close to this, then it may sound like you're grieving not just the loss of one occurrence, but also the loss of an illusion, the loss of what could have been, and the emotional toll of untangling yourself from internal and external influences and attachments made to the person, place, occurrence, or thing. It is highly complicated in nature, with grief mixed with self-liberation, which makes it super heavy but also highly transformative.
Remember, please be kind to yourself and others. Also, loss can show itself in many different ways and surface at any given time. We can relive old losses as we move through any new loss. The lack of physical loss, which can feel more typical and unclear, may cause difficulty in moving through grief and helping others in their process. With that in mind, here in this podcast, we do not pacify with sentiments and words that delay the healing and voice within, but we do hand you proverbial tissues and provide virtual hugs on command.
Yes, today we are making space for you to explore how grief and loss affect you, how to navigate and support yourself during these trying times so you can inch towards healing and recovery in a way that keeps you sane, grounded, and aware. Take the time that is needed to flush out any lingering emotions, triggered actions, so as to create a safe and brave space for you to share. If you need time, a pause, or a break, please take what you need in these moments. You know what is best for you.
Grief rarely shows up alone. It drags in its cousins, anger, confusion, guilt, nostalgia, and throws them all in a blender. Some of us grieve for a person, others grieve versions of themselves, and for many, like our anonymous guest today, the grief isn't just about losing someone. It's about losing a whole family system, piece by painful piece. Today's story is deeply personal. It's one person's layered grief for one person in their family, but through that one person, entire worlds collapsed. We'll talk about anticipatory grief, disenfranchised grief, traumatic loss, and the silent kind that no one else notices but you carry every single day. This one's particularly tender. It's entangled. It's real. So let's begin. Let's start with who we're here to talk about. Can you tell me about the person in your family who sits at the center of your grief?
Yeah. My older brother, well, I guess I could say he was kind of the sun in our family system. Not always in a perfect way. He could be overbearing, dramatic, charming, reckless, but he was bright, magnetic. People really orbited him.
You said he was your older brother. Was he older by a lot?
By about 3 years, just enough that he felt ahead of me always. Smarter, cooler. He kind of set the tone for everything, our parents' moods, our vacations, our chaos level.
It sounds like he held a lot of weight in your family dynamics and system functioning. Did you have other siblings outside of you and your brother?
No, it was just us. But when he started to struggle, everything else around us did too. That's part of what makes the grief so complicated and complex. It wasn't just losing him, it was the way we lost him. It was losing our family's version of our normal,
I can see how that would affect your family dynamics. Did your parents feel the same sense of loss with the departure of your brother?
I don't know. I know that the role I usually play in the family changed, and it didn't make sense to me at first. Then my brother became memorialized, which messed things up for me even more. I don't want to speak poorly of anyone because I know this happened to us, but my brother became a saint even though he wasn't, and then I couldn't really talk about it or what bothered me inside.
When did you feel things starting to shift for you and your brother?
Well, I'm in my early 20s now, and this was 7 years ago, so he would have been in his early 20s. He was in and out of treatment centers, depression, then anxiety, then it quickly morphed into substance use. Anything he could get his hands on. He had this impossible charm that got him so many second chances everywhere, especially with my parents. But behind the scenes, he was not himself and unraveling. And I could see it. A little at first, but way before my parents could. It was like they had these blinders on when it came to him.
What sort of things did you notice in his decline out of the ordinary from his normal self?
Well, I noticed withdrawal and his need to go out. It sounds like nothing but him and I used to play all the time video games and do chores together. I covered a bunch of times for him, thinking it would pass, but it never did. Then I felt bad because I didn't say anything those times I covered. Then his mood really changed, and no one wanted to talk about that. My parents just thought it was a phase.
That sounds like you are carrying a lot of guilt along with your grief. Is that correct?
Yes, a lot of solo thinking, isolated processing, and so much grief I do not know what to do with. I became the keeper of the quiet truths. I grieved the version of him I remembered from our childhood while watching this new erratic version of him take over. It was fast but really slow in certain aspects, which was really confusing, and no one wanted to see it. I think there were some deeper things going on for him that we didn't and still don't see.
That's such a powerful image you are talking about here. Seeing two versions of the same person while unable to reconcile the differences is a really conflicting part of grief. And the thing with a mixture of many different grief experiences at the same time, it wreaks havoc on the internal and external parts of ourselves. The parts that need to be understood to help our minds and hearts make sense of what has just occurred. It can become hard to know where do you begin to look for strength, to heal, to acknowledge what transpired, to share, to grow, to learn, etc. It can be a very confusing time for you and the family, and it doesn't protect you from the grief and loss. You still feel it whenever it comes.
Yes, exactly. Our family has changed so much since his passing. Everything is put on me now, and he is put on a platform. I miss him so much, but I am so angry still at so much that I don't even know where to start. I can't talk to my family. Even with the odd counseling sessions, I don't see a change, and I still feel very isolated. Sometimes I think I just want to go back to the days when he was struggling, because at least he'd still be alive.
I can understand that. Can you walk me through the moment you knew things had changed permanently for you?
It was the first time he overdosed. Not fatally, but really, really close. I remember sitting in the ER and my parents refusing to see that it was an overdose. I wasn't really sure it was an overdose, but the nurse had said something like that, but my parents said it was just an accident. I had no idea what my parents meant by that, but who was I to argue? And I thought, why would I? If my parents don't think it is an issue, then why would I? Turns out that the first time I feel could have really changed the outcome for my brother. Maybe not, though. It did change for me, though, now that I look back on it. After that first time, he was supposed to be fine, he was supposed to get better, but he didn't. That overdose didn't wake him up, it just erased the old parts of him as he got worse bit by bit, but no one could see it. Then there was a cognitive decline after, and he was never quite the same.
You've described so many intense emotions. Watching your brother fade in and out of lucidity, feeling responsible for holding the family together, and then carrying this grief that doesn't seem to have a name or a time limit. If you're okay with it, I'd love to gently name some of what you've been holding.
Yeah, that would actually be kind of helpful.
From what you've shared, I hear at least 5 different types of grief showing up. 1. Anticipatory grief. That's the one that started when you saw the signs early, before the overdose, before the personality shifts. It's the grief before the loss. 2. Ambiguous loss. That's when someone is physically present, but psychologically or emotionally absent. You're still seeing your brother, but he's not entirely there. That's a kind of slow, unclear mourning. 3. Disenfranchised grief. The grief that society doesn't validate. You don't get sympathy cards when someone's just unraveling in front of you. It doesn't look like death, but it feels like it. 4. Traumatic grief. The kind that gets lodged in the nervous system. Hospital visits, overdoses, high-stakes caregiving moments. That kind of grief has a physical weight. And relational grief. This is the ache for the relationship you had and the role you used to play. Not just the person, but the version of you that existed with them. Does that sit well with you?
Yeah, that hits, especially the last one. I used to feel safely connected with my bigger older brother. The role we shared made me feel somewhat protected, and now I feel like I have this new role and position to take on, and honestly, I hate it.
That makes total sense. It sounds like grief has also taken your sense of being cared for within your family. On one hand, you're exhausted, you've been grieving in so many different ways, and probably carrying a level of hypervigilance that most people wouldn't see. On the other hand, you're sitting here, willing to talk about it, openly, vulnerably. What do you think that tells you about yourself?
I guess it means I haven't checked out completely, like part of me still wants to feel and heal. I still want to connect to the memory of my brother and have new family ties, and I have no desire to follow in the same path as my brother.
Thank you for sharing parts of your intimate journey with me. I know this can be really hard, grieving and healing simultaneously. That's resilience. Not in a hustle culture kind of way, but in a deeply human, aching to understand kind of way. Does that sound right?
I don't feel resilient most days. I feel brittle and broken. Like if someone asked me to carry one more emotional weight, I'd snap.
That sounds like grief fatigue. It's not just emotional. It can mimic burnout, depression, and even exacerbate trauma symptoms. Your brain and body are doing everything they can to survive a situation they were never wired to endure.
Sometimes I even feel guilty for feeling so sad or mad, especially around my parents. It's like I am not allowed to feel my feelings.
Even in your grief, you're showing up for others, your parents, your family, your friends, your newly formed life, this conversation. But I want to remind you that your grief deserves witnesses too. And it's not selfish to need that, it's essential. Diving a little deeper, with your permission, what do you think happened to your family structure during all of this turmoil and chaos?
Well, my parents sort of went into their own type of management mode, whatever that means. My mom tried to fix everything while not talking about it, so not much got accomplished. Plus, she just cries all the time, so you can't even talk to her even if you wanted to. My dad avoids everything completely. He just goes to work and that's it, he's shut down. I slowly became the glue for everyone in the family. The appointed therapist, unbeknownst to me, I feel like I became the parent after my brother died. I'm the one who doesn't wear the rose-colored glasses.
So grief plus the caregiver role, with all the added strain and weight.
Yes, and no one acknowledges it. The stress and the strain of it all. And everyone kept saying, "You're so strong." I just wanted to scream. I'm not strong. I'm depleted. Everything changed. Grieving my brother, the future I imagined us having, and secretly grieving the fact that I now had no one left who made me feel like the little brother again. I lost so much, including my parents, even though they are still alive and well-ish.
You were grieving a relational role too. You have a lot at play right now in the field of grief.
I think that's where grief gets completely underrated. We think we're just grieving people, but we're also grieving how people made us feel, their roles in our ecosystem.
Let's talk about the toll this took. Physically, emotionally, spiritually. What did grief look like on you? How did you feel when you wore your grief?
It was sneaky, like really sneaky. At first, I felt I was holding it together, and I measured that by not crying at all. But my memory stayed persistent and kept bringing up stuff I was not wanting to deal with. I told myself I can deal with it later. I just need to get past this part, hold it together till I can figure out my family. As I advanced, though, my patience evaporated. I couldn't concentrate in school or read textbooks anymore. My grades slipped. I kept getting the face from my teachers. They were too emotional. It affected me so badly, I had to keep going too. I got these migraines, and I couldn't turn off my mind, so I was not sleeping. We aren't a particularly religious family, so I didn't connect with much in that area. I am not sure I would have either, because I was so angry and God and my brother while keeping loving him too. And I had this constant low to mid to high grade panic. I wore it like grief was a second skin.
That aligns with the literature on grief fatigue. Studies show that ambiguous and cumulative grief can lead to elevated cortisol levels, disrupted sleep cycles, and even immune suppression. It's not just emotional, it's embodied.
That's a little bit reassuring and horrifying all at once.
Right? Welcome to Grief Anatomy. Can I try something from grief therapy just for a moment? It's a reflective practice used in counseling called a miracle question. It helps us imagine a reality where even just a little bit of the pain isn't quite so heavy. Here's how it goes. Let's say tonight while you're sleeping, a miracle happens, but you don't know it's happened yet because you're asleep. And in this miracle, the weight of your grief, especially the parts that feel tangled, invisible, or too complicated to explain, has eased significantly. You still love your brother, you still remember what you've been through, but somehow you feel lighter, calmer, more like yourself. When you wake up tomorrow, what's the first thing you notice? What tells you that something is different?
Okay, that's a big one. Heavy. I think if the miracle happened overnight, the first thing I'd notice is that my chest wouldn't feel so tight. I wouldn't feel so restricted. I could breathe. You know that feeling when you wake up and immediately remember something bad has happened? I feel like that dread that wouldn't be there anymore. I'd wake up and just breathe, like a full breath, without guilt or grief hijacking it. Then maybe, just maybe, I know this sounds small, but maybe I'd make myself a coffee with peace and not feel like I have to brace myself for the day. I wouldn't feel like I'm about to perform my own life. I'd just be living it my way, without so many burdens and the weight of others. And I think in this version of the day, my mom would come into the kitchen and not be crying. We'd have a nice talk about something dumb and real, like our shared hatred of emptying the dishwasher, or how much we both secretly love crime shows and documentaries. And realistically, my dad, maybe he'd sit at the table with us, not even say anything earth-shattering, just be there, present, not shut down. And on this miracle day and time, I think I'd go outside. Like, really go outside and spend some time in nature, without a destination. Maybe walk without checking my phone or trying to feel useful to everyone else. Just be. Just let myself exist without fixing anything. I'd stop punishing myself for not being okay all the time. Maybe I'd even text my brother's old number. I still have it. It feels weird to delete, but I'd text him something simple like, "Miss you. Wish we could have talked more before everything got so heavy." I would share the last in video games. And then maybe I'd breathe again.
I love that you said that with so much clarity. That was so vivid. It's like your body and spirit already know what healing would feel like for you, even for a day. That was wonderfully reflective. Thank you for sharing and holding brave space.
Yeah. I guess it's not about pretending he didn't struggle or that my family's suddenly perfect. It's more like the pressure to keep everything from collapsing is gone, and there's space. Space to remember him with love and with anger, to miss him without being consumed by him, and space for me to feel like someone's kid again, not the emotional custodian of the family.
That's powerful and so honest. Thank you for walking through that with me. What you imagined and expressed in the miracle question had less tension, small joys, restored roles, and a reclaimed breath. It's a blueprint, a whisper of what healing might look like, not as a destination, but in moments. That's the thing about grief. It teaches us to long for peace and presence in the same sentence. If you had to name the types of grief you're carrying related to your brother and family, what would they be?
Okay, let's see. You named them earlier, which I think is accurate. 1. Anticipatory grief for all the years I knew something was coming. 2. Ambiguous loss when he was still alive, still walking around, still earthbound, but he really was not here in the way he once was. 3rd, disenfranchised grief because he was addicted. No one really acknowledged his passing in the same regard as if he'd passed of cancer. 4. Traumatic grief. The emergency rooms, the screaming, the chaos, and relational grief. I miss the version of myself and the family structure that only existed when he was around.
What's helped you cope, or at least survive until this moment?
Honestly, I don't have a clue. I'm a mess. Too many things to contend with. I guess I have my own small grief rituals that I do. I keep a box of stuff that reminds me of him that I look at from time to time. I also continue to play the same video games we played together. They are old and outdated now, but I talk to him a little when I play. It is like the old times, having a conversation while playing, throwing down some jabs and good-humored pokes like we used to. It keeps his memory alive a little.
That's beautiful. I love that it is something for just you and him. What a nice way to spend time with him in his absence.
My parents want me to go to therapy, but they themselves don't go, so it feels like I'm spinning my wheels.
That sounds difficult. So, I want to sit with something you just said. My parents want me to go to therapy, but they themselves don't go, so it feels like I'm spinning my wheels. That sounds complicated. You're being asked to carry the emotional awareness baton, but it doesn't sound like they're willing to run the race with you. That can feel unfair, even a little performative on their end. Let me ask you something gently. Do you think counseling would help you, or do you think it would help them more?
Wow. Yeah, that's the question, right? Honestly, I think therapy could help all of us, but I feel like they're outsourcing the emotional labor to me. Like, yo, you go to therapy and come back fixed so we don't have to change. And I really do feel like I've been doing the work on my end, what I can anyway. I'm working with what I have. I've read some books, sourced some support online, and done the mindfulness stuff. I still don't know what I am doing, but I am working at meeting the milestones with grace. When I graduated, it was hard and different. Milestones are hard and daunting. But what makes it feel like I'm spinning my wheels is no one's meeting me there whenever I communicate. No one is getting out of their comfort zone either. I'm learning how to talk about the hard stuff, how to feel it without folding. But when I try to bring that into the family space, it's like I'm speaking a different language.
That's such a common dynamic in grief and trauma healing. You begin the work hoping to fix the system, but the system wasn't designed for healing. It was designed for survival. Your parents might be in what we call emotional avoidance or even protective denial. That's not a judgment, it's just a coping strategy. But the hard part is that when one person in a family system starts healing, it disrupts the whole ecosystem. And if the others aren't ready to join you, it can feel like you're healing in a vacuum seal.
That's exactly it. I'm not against therapy at all. I just don't want to be the emotional mule. Like, if therapy is the car, I don't want to be the only one driving it while everyone else is yelling directions from the back seat or is a passenger princess.
It sounds like what you're describing is a systemic imbalance in emotional labor. When the youngest or most emotionally attuned person ends up carrying the torch while also managing their own grief, pain, and trauma, it's exhausting. And it's often invisible. Can I reflect something back to you? It sounds like you're not resisting therapy. You're resisting going alone. You're tired of going first, of being the one who has to get better so others don't have to get uncomfortable. Does that sound close?
Sometimes I wonder if I'm just being stubborn or avoidant myself. But it's not that, it's that I want to be met. Everything changed after my brother passed, but no one is acting like it. I don't want to be the one who brings everyone back to the realities of the situation, so I stay quiet and do my own work and healing. It is honestly stifling at times, most times actually, with them.
Of course, you deserve to be met where you are at, as this happened to you too. Healing isn't a solo sport. Even the strongest people need someone to sit beside them while they fall apart. So here's a reframe you might want to play with. What if therapy wasn't about fixing you, but about giving your grief a safe landing strip, even if no one else is ready to land with you yet? And one day, if your parents ever do decide to step into that space, you'll already know the way.
Oh, I like that. I can get behind that. I mean, it can't hurt more than it already does.
You can be a beacon of light, hope, and healing for yourself first, like putting the airplane mask on yourself first. You can be the beneficiary of your own accord with practices like therapy. There is a good chance that you have a different perspective on this grief than the others in your family, as they do with your brother's loss of life and addiction issues. Makes sense. I still deeply love him. I always will. I miss him so much. He holds a special place, and we had a bond like no other. The difference between closure and integration is an invitation and consent to experience the personal loss head-on, knowing help comes in many collective forms. So many people think grief has an end, but really, it just shifts form so we can live with it, coexist with it, and acknowledge it, as it isn't going anywhere. If someone listening is in the thick of this kind of grief, complicated, confusing, cumulative, what do you think you would say to them?
I would tell them to keep going. Do what is right in terms of connection, whatever that looks like for you. Give yourself permission to feel and grieve without judgment. Let it be messy because it is messy. You owe it to yourself. You don't owe anyone else. And if your grief feels invisible like mine does, that doesn't mean it's not real and it doesn't exist. It means it's sacred, and sacred things aren't always seen. My mixed grief is like a house with too many doors. Some lead to memories, some lead to rage, some to silence, and some eventually to forgiveness, hopefully.
Nicely said. This isn't about letting go. It's about letting grief sit at the table, sometimes quietly, sometimes loudly, always with meaning. Here's what I hope you're hearing, and maybe what someone listening at home needs too. Grief is not a monolith, it's a mosaic. And some pieces, like grief, don't always announce themselves with tears or declarations, but they live in us all the same. Thank you, guest. Thank you for sharing your story and grief journey with us. We are incredibly grateful you shared brave space and were vulnerable to help us learn and grow in all things grief-related.
Thank you for having me today. Have a good night.
What do grief and consent have in common? Well, everything, actually. In this episode of Grief Anatomy, we're cracking open the vault on emotional boundaries, involuntary vulnerability, and exploring the awkward art of asking about consent.
With our signature blend of wit, warmth, and uncomfortable truths, Episode 4 tackles questions like, can someone consent to support when they're in the thick of loss? What does emotional autonomy look like when you can't even get out of bed? Are you helping, or are you just trying to make yourself feel better? Consent isn't just for private occasions in our lives. It's for the boardroom, the hospital room, the funeral, and the occasional WhatsApp group chat. You know, the ones. Let's unpack how grief scrambles our sense of choice and how we can show up for each other without overstepping.
Some talking points. 1. What is consent in the context of grief? What defines emotional consent? Permission to enter someone's emotional space. So let's talk about something we don't usually connect to grief. Consent. I mean emotional consent, the permission to enter someone's emotional space, to ask the heavy questions, to give advice, to be there in ways that feel good, not just for you, but for them. Ever had someone say, "Let me know if you need anything," and you felt this kind of weird combo of gratitude and some rage? It feels unkind not to accept a thank you for offering, but also, why do I now feel responsible for managing your good intentions?
That right there, that's consent confusion.
You're grieving, your body's in fight or flight, your brain's a foggy marshmallow, and suddenly you're supposed to know exactly what you need, who you want to receive it from, and how to phrase it politely?
Spoiler alert, you don't. And honestly, you shouldn't ever have to.
Grief messes with your ability to articulate or even recognize your own needs. It strips away your sense of agency. You might say yes to something you don't want because saying no feels exhausting, or you are preset and programmed to politely accept out of not knowing or kindness. Or you might just shut everyone out, not because you don't love them, but because their presence feels like too much skin on a sunburn.
So let's check in with you, dear listeners. Have you ever been in that place before, where someone offered help or asked a well-meaning question, and instead of feeling seen and heard, you felt rather invaded? Or perhaps maybe you've been that person, jumping in to help without realizing you were crossing an invisible line of theirs? Hit pause and have a think about it.
There are many facets of emotional consent in grief, but walking on eggshells isn't one of them. It's about asking before making assumptions and understanding that sometimes the kindest thing you can do is give someone space to figure that out with you, or singularly. We need to address and talk about the myth of the good griever and how performative helping can backfire. Big time, boy do I know. So stay with us. We're just getting to the squishy center.
Grief doesn't just break your heart, it hijacks your brain. When you're grieving, even basic decisions feel like algebra. Articulating needs, enforcing boundaries, giving consent, forget it. The capacity to say no, not now, or that's too much can vanish under the weight of grief and loss. That's why consent in grief isn't just about asking, it's about asking gently, asking often, and being okay with no answer at all. If you bring lasagna but expect tears, are you feeding them or feeding your own narrative? A challenge to our listeners for reflection. Are you offering help with strings attached in these moments or expecting a certain outcome?
We have talked about boundaries in previous episodes, but we are going to touch upon boundaries and the grieving brain today. Grief impacts executive function and decision-making. Asking someone in acute grief to check in with how they're feeling is like asking a goldfish to do their taxes. I really want to highlight that consent must be ongoing. What someone said yes to yesterday might be a no for today.
There is also strength in saying no, especially regarding power and pressure. I knew someone that was told not to grieve the loss of their partner because the family had other more pressing issues come immediately into play. Therefore, their grief process was delayed, and now for them, a confusing talking point for resolution, as they do not feel like they are allowed to speak about it since so much time has passed in between.
Talking about how power dynamics, age, gender, culture, role, responsibility, etc., especially in family structures, means addressing consent in grief spaces as well. Here's a juicy, under-discussed truth. Consent in grief isn't neutral. It's shaped by power, and power wears many hats: age, gender, culture, status, even spiritual authority. For example, picture this. You're at a wake. Your elderly uncle pulls you into a suffocating hug you didn't ask for. Do you pull away? Probably not. He's grieving too. He's older. He means well. And now you're trapped under the weight of his feelings and your own.
Consent gets murky in grief spaces because hierarchies sneak in. If you're young, you're expected to defer to elders. If you're a woman, you might feel pressure to be emotionally available, nurturing, even while you're breaking inside. If you're from a culture where grief is communal and expressive, saying, "I need space," can feel like betrayal. If you're in a caregiver role, nurse, therapist, big sibling, you're expected to hold space, not take it up. It is a highly confusing time. When someone with more power steps into your grief, even kindly, it can feel like something's being taken, not offered.
I like to think of it this way. If the boss who controls your schedule says, "Take all the time you need, but keep sending you emails every day," that's definitely not consent. That's grief-flavored micromanaging, confusing and damaging. It's like, hurry up and wait. Just take a second. Who's allowed to comfort you? Who do you feel safe saying no to when you're not okay being touched, talked to, or looked at like a fragile vase?
Yes, in grief there is already a sense of loss of control and vulnerability. Layer power on top of that, and it's easy to forget you still have a right to boundaries as well. So the next time you're supporting someone in grief, especially if you've got more age, authority, or cultural clout, ask gently, then back off loudly.
We are also going to jump right into micro consents that matter, and how do you want to talk about it, And do you have the capacity to talk about it? Might just be the most underrated magical phrases in the grief dictionary. Micro consents that really matter to people. Offer real scripts. Do you have capacity for me to share something heavy? Would it be okay if I checked in again next week? Really emphasize small asks build trust. Big assumptions break it.
Okay, let's talk about the elephant in the room. Not the grief elephant, he's already moved in, redecorated, and is binge watching your nervous system. I mean the cultural elephant, the one that says, we don't openly talk about consent in grief because in our family, in our culture, in our community, we already know what to do. And honestly, that's not wrong, it just has some gray hues to it, like what if the person wants to deviate outside the cultural community and grieve a little differently with different traditions, i.e., the partner's cultural way instead?
That's true, a really good point. Not all cultures express care through direct communication. In many communities, love isn't spoken, it's shown. Grief support might come through presence, ritual, or shared silence rather than explicit check-ins or verbal affirmations.
Yes, and in some families, just showing up, sitting close, or quietly doing something helpful is the language of support. It doesn't need to be spelled out to be understood. That is the familial consent, whether or not it's spoken out loud.
It seems more like, here's stew. Sit down. We're watching soccer until you cry. And you know what? For some folks, that's safer. That's sacred. It is easier for them, but for the folks who need something a bit different, a deviation from the traditional norm. This is where the complexity of consent and grieving in cultures can go awry. When we assume that everyone understands the same unspoken rules, people fall through the cracks. You know that cousin who needs to talk but isn't asked, and equally, the aunt who needs space but keeps getting smothered in responsibilities outside their scope or capacity.
So the deeper questions become, how do we honor cultural care without making it compulsory? How do we check in, even quietly, to make sure our support actually lands? How do we connect with those who need care and support outside our traditional lens? Hey, can I enter your emotional landscape and accompany you through your loss in whatever capacity?
It can be as simple as, would it be okay if I stayed for a bit? Or, I brought food. No pressure to eat. Just wanted you to have something. Or my personal favorite, no need to talk. I'll just sit here and fold your laundry badly for you.
Cultural consent might be implicit, but care is universal when we stay curious, flexible, and kind. So whether it's a shoulder squeeze, a silent prayer, or a 3-hour gossip session about who cried loudest at the funeral, context really does matter in these moments.
Consent doesn't have to be loud. It just has to be real and authentic. To reiterate and summarize the key takeaways, grief and consent intersect at the level of agency. Loss strips away control. Consent restores it. Help isn't helpful if it's not wanted. Even good intentions need permission. Emotional capacity changes day by day. Ask often and mean it when you say, it's okay to say no. Consent is proactive, not reactive. Don't wait for someone to collapse before checking if they want support. You don't have to be perfect, just intentional. Consent isn't about rigid rules, it's about relational care.
In scenario 1, the theme outlined is dementia, caregiving, and ambiguous loss. Let's say you're 43 years old. You've got 2 teenagers, a mortgage, a demanding job, and a dad with mid-stage Alzheimer's. He used to be a math teacher, sharp as a tack, a Sudoku god, the guy who fixed everything with duct tape and stubborn optimism. But now you are seeing that he calls you by your brother's name and forgets how to use the microwave. You continue to visit every weekend on schedule. You refill his medications, pay his bills, throw out any rotting food, cook with the remaining food, and sit with him in eerie silence while the old classic TV shows play their reruns that he no longer understands. You find yourself grieving while he's still alive in this state. Sometimes you have a creeping feeling of relief when he sleeps, then hate yourself for feeling relieved. Other times you wish it would just be over, but then the guilt bulldozes you in this never-ending cycle. Am I grateful for myself or for him?
As a professional response goes, to me, this looks like textbook anticipatory grief layered with ambiguous loss. The person is physically present but psychologically absent. You're mourning the dad who used to be your anchor, but there's no obituary, no funeral, no closure. It's a loss without a clear ending. Furthermore, clinically speaking, this could be called grief fatigue. Present is emotional burnout, caregiver role strain, and often suppressed rage. It's common to experience irritability, memory lapses, or dissociation, symptoms that look like depression but are rooted in chronic anticipatory grief. The hard yet best bet in recovery is setting and maintaining realistic boundaries for your situation. You need to understand that you can't be the perfect caregiver and the perfect child and the perfect parent to your kids while navigating this kind of grief. Something has to give. Consider a family care plan or a respite program in your area if possible. Even one day off a month can restore your nervous system. Also, sometimes rituals can help. Small grief rituals. Maybe you light a candle for your dad, honoring the person he was. Maybe you journal about the version of him you miss the most and articulate meaning, making memories. Give your grief a shape and be unbelievably kind to yourself while you work through these extremely difficult circumstances. Things to say to someone else or yourself experiencing this kind of grief. These statements of support would make Brené Brown happy when they are expressed with empathy and kindness.
1. You're carrying an impossible load, and I want you to know I see how heavy it is. This kind of validation is vital. So often, caregivers feel invisible in their grief because the person they're losing is still alive.
2. It makes sense that you're grieving even though he's still here. What you're going through is called ambiguous loss, and it's real. Name it. Putting a term to their experience helps reduce isolation and confusion.
3. You don't have to feel guilty for needing rest or relief. Feeling exhausted or even resentful doesn't mean you love him any less. Guilt is one of the heaviest companions in caregiving. Offer them a non-judgmental place to land.
4. It's okay to miss the version of your dad that no longer exists. That grief deserves your attention too. Invite them to honor their grief for the past and not just focus on the practical demands of the present.
5. Have you had a chance to talk to anyone about this? Maybe a therapist, support group, or even a friend who gets it? Gently remind them that support exists and they deserve access to it.
6. What would a small act of care look like for you this week? Even 10 minutes of something just for you. Bring in micro boundaries, consent, or rituals that help them re-regulate their nervous system.
7. You are not failing. You are adapting to a kind of loss that most people don't even have language for. Reframe their exhaustion as a sign of deep love meeting a difficult reality, not failure.
Here are some things to say to yourself inside and outside the scenario outlined before. 1. I am doing the best I can with what I have. That has to be enough right now. Self-compassion is your emotional oxygen mask.
2. My grief is real. Just because there wasn't a funeral doesn't mean I haven't lost something sacred. You're grieving an invisible loss, and it really does matter.
3. It's okay to feel two things at once: love and resentment, devotion and exhaustion, hope and despair. Hold space for contradictions. It's part of being human in impossible situations.
4th, I don't have to earn rest. I don't have to be everything to everyone all the time. Say this often. Write it on your mirror if you need to.
5. Rituals can help me create a container for grief. I can light a candle, write a memory, or even say goodbye in small ways. Giving shape to grief doesn't mean letting go of love. It means honoring what is.
6. Even if he forgets who I am, I remember who he is. And that remembering is its own form of love. This keeps your connection alive even as his memory fades.
7. I deserve support. I deserve rest. I deserve to be well, even in the middle of this. Not after it ends. Right now.
Things to say to someone else in this situation. 1. You're grieving a lot more than just her illness. You're grieving the life you had together, the support you counted on, the rhythm of your days. Validate the multi-layered nature of their grief. It's not just about death, it's about destabilization.
2. This isn't just stress, this is anticipatory grief, and it's cumulative. Your mind is holding more than it can name. Offer language that helps them make sense of their overwhelm.
3. It makes so much sense that you're crying in secret places. You're carrying a world on your shoulders, and you're still showing up. That's heroic, but it's also human to break down. Affirm their pain without glorifying their suffering.
4. You're not selfish for needing her. You're human. Codependency often grows in love, and love is not a flaw. Destigmatize the emotional dependency. It doesn't make them weak.
5. Have you been able to name some of the things you're already grieving, like her cooking or those quiet late-night chats? Introduce the practice of grief pre-processing, which can help regulate their nervous system.
6. You shouldn't have to do this alone. Have you connected with a caregiver support group, even online? I can help you find one. Offer concrete help. Direct them to safe, appropriate resources.
7. Even just 10 minutes a day where you're not the one holding it all together, that's a radical act of care. You deserve it. Normalize breaks and boundaries, even in crisis.
Beautiful things to say to yourself in this situation. 1. This isn't just about losing her. It's about losing the version of my life that had her in it. Let the grief be personal and let it sprawl into the real dimensions it's taking.
2. It's okay to need her. I don't have to apologize for how tightly our lives are woven together. Dependency, especially in loving, co-parenting relationships, is not a failure. It's a bond.
3. I'm allowed to fall apart, even if only behind pantry doors. That doesn't make me a bad mom, it makes me an overwhelmed one, and that's okay. Remove the shame from breaking down. Your humanity is intact.
4. Every day I am holding up the sky, but I can start to let pieces down, maybe just one piece today. Give yourself permission to offload one thing, one step.
5. I can grieve in pieces. I can say goodbye to her lasagna, her humming in the kitchen, her hand on my back. I don't have to do it all at once. Micro-mourning can create pockets of emotional space to breathe.
6. I am not alone even when I feel like I am. Help exists, and I'm worthy of receiving it. Remind yourself that asking for support is not a burden, it's a right.
7. I am more than what I hold together. Even if everything falls apart, I will still be here, and I will rebuild from there. Ground yourself in your strength and adaptability, not perfection. All right, welcome to Myth Me With That Grief, the segment where we separate the fact from the fiction, the clinical from the conspiracy theorist. We are going to throw out a myth or truth, and you guess whether it's legit or just emotional folklore designed to keep us stuck.
Myth number 1. If you're still grieving after a year has come and gone, something's wrong with you. What do you think, truth or myth?
Ding ding, that's a big old myth. Grief doesn't punch a time card. Some people feel functional in weeks. Others carry it like an emotional ankle weight for years. It's not about how long, it's about how honestly you're grieving. There's no emotional stopwatch here.
On to myth number 2. Grief only happens when someone dies.
What do you think, truth or myth?
BZs. That is another myth. We grieve breakups, job losses, identity shifts, aging, chronic illness, menopause. Heck, even your favorite sandwich place closing down can hit strangely hard. If your heart says, ouch, grief says, I'm here. Grief shows up everywhere.
Myth number 3. Tears are the best indicator of grief. What do you think, truth or myth?
We can't fool you. It is a myth again. Some people cry, some people clean obsessively, some binge watch forensic documentaries while eating cheese slices straight from the fridge. Of course, we know how my colleague deals with it, ice cream. Grief expresses itself in bizarre human ways. Tears are just one flavor.
Moving on to suggested resources and supports, in case you need them. Support and resources for collective healing. Grieving unconventional losses, especially when the relationship is toxic or complicated, can be isolating and confusing. Traditional grief resources might not feel like the right fit when your loss is tangled with trauma, resentment, or relief, because we can't know the extent or the severity of what grief shows up, or when I thought it best to provide a mix of soft solutions and some useful resources for each type of grief.
When you're grieving the damage, not just the loss, we have some soft solutions for you. Letters you'll never send, ritual. Write everything you wish you could say, no filter. Burn, shred, or store it. It's about getting it out, not making it pretty. This is a tried and true process that works.
Reverse memories scrapbook. Instead of nostalgia, collect reminders of why you're free now, quotes, pictures, and notes about how you're rebuilding yourself. It is not for everyone, so take it or leave it.
Mood playlist for letting it out. Angry? Play Riot Girl Punk. Sad? Bring on the emo vibes. Empowered? Epic battle soundtracks could be helpful too. You are in control. Grief. Jar. Write out all the frustrating things people say about your grief. He was still your dad. You'll regret it one day. Throw them in a jar. Occasionally read them out in your best sarcastic voice.
Grief rewriting. Exercise. Instead of, I lost my father, try, I lost a version of myself that still hoped he would change. This shifts the focus to what you actually feel.
Find your people. Surround yourself with others who get it. Chosen family, online communities, or even fictional characters. Schrodinger's parent exercise acknowledge both realities. They were present but emotionally absent. List what was there and what was missing.
Grounding objects. If good memories exist, keep a reminder, a photo, an object, separate from the pain. If there aren't any, create something new, a journal of lessons learned from their absence. Try closure without them. Rituals. Write a eulogy, not for them, but for the relationship you never had.
Some useful resources, book suggestions, the Grief Recovery Handbook, James and Friedman focuses on unresolved emotions. It Didn't Start With You, Mark Wallen for Untangling Generational Trauma. The Rules of Estrangement, Joshua Coleman for When People Don't Understand Your Grief. The Body Keeps the Score, Bessel van der Kolk for Understanding Trauma's Effect on Grief. Adult Children of Emotionally Immature Parents, Lindsay C. Gibson, Mother Hunger, Kelly McDaniel applies to absent, neglectful fathers too. Ambiguous Loss, Pauline Boss, literally the book on this kind of grief. And finally, Running on Empty by Jonas Webb for healing from emotionally unavailable parents.
For our online support group seekers, Our Estranged Adult Child on Reddit, support from others breaking free from toxic parents. Facebook group, Complicated Grief Support, for those struggling with loss plus trauma. The Estranged Heart Podcast plus community, for people grieving toxic parents. Facebook group, Healing from Narcissistic Parents, if the trauma involved control, manipulation. Survivors Network of Those Abused by Priests, SNAP. Even if not religious, it has great trauma-informed grief support. And finally, Refuge in Grief, website and Instagram with validation-heavy grief support.
And some therapy types that may help. Complicated Grief Therapy, CGT, is specifically designed for prolonged grief. IFS, Internal Family Systems Therapy, for healing emotional wounds from controlling parents. Narrative Therapy, helps you reframe your story on your terms. Group Therapy for estranged families. Many therapists now run groups for adult children of toxic parents.
Additional therapy resources, Gestalt Therapy, for processing unresolved conversations with absent parents. Existential Therapy, for making meaning out of something that never really existed. EMDR, Eye Movement Desensitization and Reprocessing, for processing traumatic grief. Somatic Therapy, because trauma isn't just in the mind, it's in the body too.
I love this section where we offer affirmations and mantras to help with internal regulation. Feel free to take it or leave it. It is for you to decide.
These are affirmations says 1. I can hold love and loss at the same time. A reminder that contradictions don't cancel each other out, they coexist in grief.
2. It's okay if I don't have words for this. My feelings are still valid. Grief often shows up before language can catch up.
3. I am allowed to rest even while things are falling apart. Grief doesn't require you to be on call 24/7.
4. I am grieving, not failing. Reframing your exhaustion or emotional numbness as part of the process, not a personal defect.
5. Letting go doesn't mean I love less. It means I'm honoring change. This helps when guilt creeps in for adapting, moving on, or creating boundaries.
6. I deserve the same compassion I give to others. Turn the kindness inward.
7. Grief is not linear. I am not behind. I am simply becoming. Release the timeline. Trust the process.
Some tangible mantras for grounding during grief.
Inhale, this moment is real.
Exhale, and I am still here.
Inhale, I am allowed to feel it all.
Exhale, and I am safe in my body.
Inhale, grief moves through me.
Exhale, but it does not define me.
Repeat slowly, with a hand over your chest or stomach, whatever feels grounding. You can even add in body tapping as you recite.
Whew. Okay, let's take a collective breath. That was a lot of talking and information throughout the podcast, because mixed grief is honestly a lot. It's the slow burn, the quiet ache, the goodbye before the goodbye. It's crying in parking lots, snapping at your kids, Googling medical care at 2 a.m., and wondering why you feel so lost.
If you're nodding along right now, I want to reassure you of this. First of all, you are not broken. You are grieving. Meet yourself where you are at and be patient and kind to yourself while you navigate the complexities of this unknown grief journey. And ultimately, grieving in advance doesn't make you ungrateful, selfish, or cold. It makes you human.
So whether you're mourning your mom's laugh before it fades, or your dad's memory as it slips through your fingers, or your own freedom as caregiving swallows your time, your grief is real and valid and deserving of space and time.
We talked a lot today about invisible grief, how it lives in the body, how it messes with your sense of time, and how it often goes unacknowledged because there's no obituary, no funeral, no consoling food brigade getting delivered.
A reminder though, just because it's invisible doesn't mean it's imaginary. So maybe today you let yourself mourn, just a little. Write a letter, light a candle, yell into a pillow, laugh at a memory, do what you need to do, unfiltered and beneficial to you. It all matters and it all counts. You'll thank yourself that you did this one small step.
And hey, if you're feeling especially alone in this grief spiral, I want to leave you with something grounding, the Mourner's Bill of Rights. This is a real thing. And yes, Canadians have grief rights too.
You most definitely have the right to mourn in your own way and at your own pace. Feel conflicting emotions, yes, even relief. Take breaks from grief without guilt. Say no to toxic positivity. Ask for help. Not be okay.
Be sure to stick that on your fridge or your bathroom mirror or tattoo it on your soul, whatever works. All right, friends, we made it through another grief episode, so that's it for today's emotional roller coaster. Thanks for sticking with us and participating. Be tender with yourself this week, especially in the moments that feel like too much and not enough all at once. I'll be back next time with more stories, more messy feelings, and probably more bad metaphors. Until then, grieve boldly, love hard, and hydrate, damn it.